Okay. Oh, we are live.
We are live. So, hello, welcome everyone to Spring
Hey,
IO in
hola.
Barcelona. So we're here with Alina.
Thank you for having me.
We were planning to do this how many months ago?
For many months, but I think it's way more fun in person, right? When we can get in same room, talk, maybe also discuss the conference and what's happening here. So
Exactly. So we were planning already. I don't know when we were initially planning to do this. Like, let's do a little short live code thing to build an app, and then see like what can we do if we compile it to a native app with GraalVM. What are the benefits? I know a lot of Vaadin folks have heard of Graal. Maybe they have like a vague idea of what it is, but like maybe it's fun to just see all the steps to actually do it, and it's not as difficult as it might seem.
It is easier than it might seem, especially now in 2024, and having all the cool frameworks like Spring Boot and Vaadin there to help you out. I'm just wondering if people can hear us, if the sound is okay. So maybe people are watching. If they can like give us a heads up.
Comment on in the chat there. Just give us a thumbs up or something if you can hear us. And we are.
Because I said there are people, right? So if you can like tell us if it's going okay, then we can be sure. But other than that, we can just keep talking.
Yeah. All right. Well, nobody's saying that they cannot hear us. Simon is there. Hello.
Oh, hey, Simon. Yeah, it's very cool. So we're right now at Spring IO in Barcelona. You can see all the people walking behind us. It's now the lunchtime, and it's so much fun. There have been so many cool talks. And you're speaking in like an hour or something, right?
Yeah, 3:30. And you already spoke yesterday.
I'm all done. So I have this live stream, and then I'm done with all the public speaking for the next 2 days.
So how do you want to start? Do you want to just we're on the Vaadin channel, so I think most people know Vaadin more than they know GraalVM. So do you want to give a quick intro to what it is that we're going to be looking at, and then I can start live coding and
let's do it. Yeah, so GraalVM is basically a JDK, right? So it can do anything that your normal JDK can do for you. So if you're using OpenJDK, Oracle GDK, etc., we can do all the same things, and we just add things on top, right? So we have added our own Graal Jet compiler, which is replacing C2. So as on OpenJDK, you would have C2 as your top-tier optimizing compiler. We have our own, and what's cool, it's written itself in Java, which is maybe less trivial or less predictable, right? But it has very good peak performance and very good startup, because then we also compile it with native image to a native executable. So we are also using it internally. So when you get our builds of GraalVM, it also has the JIT compiler compiled to a native executable.
Okay.
That is one big thing that we
That's
added,
cool.
and we see some companies, teams, users using GraalVM as a JDK and getting something like 10, 15, 20% peak performance improvement.
So just running Java, not compile.
And honestly, the migration is so easy. So you just download GraalVM, you put it as your Java home, you run things in GraalVM, and bam, easily you have an easy
I like to use
performance
SDK, man. It was like, it's almost too easy these days compared to what it used to be.
And I was just saying this in my session yesterday. So even if you want to do early access builds, so we publish early access builds of like the releases that are coming now but not released yet.
Yeah.
So even those are available on SDK man, and it's so easy. You just do SDK man install GraalVM Java 2023 early access. You have it. You set it as default, and it's all done. So if you're not using SDK man yet, you should, because it's amazing and it's the easiest way probably to install and like use new JDKs, right?
Yeah, by far, at least as far as I know. Like there are other ways, but I think also the ability to just switch from one to another. If you need to test something for whatever reason, you want to test an early release version, but you don't want to have it like going back and forth between.
Or maybe sometimes you need to switch back to, I don't know, Java 17 or something, right? For some specific libraries that it makes it so easy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there is one easy way to consume GraalVM, and that is from SDK man. And we briefly talked about GraalVM as a JDK, right? But there is more to it. So GraalVM is sometimes also known as this polyglot VM, because we can run more languages than Java. So we can run JavaScript, Python, etc., whatever you want on the JVM, or even like standalone. And then we can also do interop between the languages. So for example, maybe you want to use some library from Python, and then you can embed it basically in your Java application and do a part of that logic, maybe reuse some ML library from the Python.
That's really cool. I haven't explored that part of GraalVM. So maybe that's our next stream.
I mean, it is cool, but there's also a very nice like practical aspect to it. Because for example, if you want to do server-side rendering of JavaScript, you can do so with GraalVM on the JVM, because you also have a JavaScript engine, right?
Yeah.
So it's cool.
And that's something that like we're going to be using our newer framework Hilla today, which uses React and many people have asked, like, can you server-side render that?
Oh, absolutely,
like, it's certainly possible. It's in our backlog of things to explore, but we haven't gotten there. But just knowing that, like, technically there's nothing preventing us from doing it.
But do you think it will be a lot of work to implement it, or does it seem like fairly easy?
So for the types of apps that we're building, typically more business apps, it's not as essential to server render things that it is for something that you want to get indexed by like bots or something. So a lot of times we're building single page apps where you don't want to like server render a grid and then refetch everything, because it's very dynamic, the data that we're typically showing. Okay. So, but anyway, it's super interesting to know that we could do it.
Hopefully guys, you can get there and we can help you run it.
We don't need to like go outside the Java ecosystem to do that.
And then the last but not least part of GraalVM is native image, and it's a ahead of time compilation where you can take your application, compile it ahead of time into a native executable, and then you can just deploy it or run it on a machine that doesn't have a JVM, and it will run fully as a native application by itself. And that is something that we'll explore today in the demo, right?
Yeah. And speaking of that, I think it's time to get coding.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because we want to do a lot, and we have, well, I guess we have time, but we're hungry and it's lunchtime, so we want.
We want to also get some lunch. So let's start with the demo.
So we're starting on the updated Vaadin website. We just released this, but we're going to use the Vaadin start place to create a new project. And when we're talking about this, Jake, on you said that you want to have a travel tip application.
You can start coding and I can tell the story. So this is very funny. I actually have a similar demo built by myself, so just using Spring Boot. And the app that we will be building is a travel recommendation app where you can say as a user, what is the country that you want to visit, what is the activity that you feel like doing, and what is the mood that you are in. And then you will use, I guess, OpenAI as well, right?
We're going to be using OpenAI as well.
To get a travel recommendation. And the funny thing is that I have built by myself using Spring Boot, and there is like a very minimal front end that I have also created. But it's not like, I wouldn't call it ugly, but it's very minimalistic because you can tell that it's like front end built by a backend person. So Marcus here jumped in and he created basically a super quick, a much more beautiful version of this app using Vaadin. So this does the exact same thing as my app does, but looks so much better and so much more user friendly.
Good. So I just created a project here. I selected the 24 for pre-release, so that's the latest. Then I selected Java 21 for this particular app. I have a GraalVM JDK, of course, locally for this to work. So what we have is a Spring Boot project. Don't tell Josh it's not on 3.3 yet. We'll
get there.
We'll get there. But what we will do though is we will add the OpenAI Spring Boot starter. I noticed there's a little problem with the plugin in IntelliJ. It doesn't actually add the needed repository for getting the pre-release Spring milestone.
Right. Because it was maybe released like yesterday or something.
Because the version is still milestone release, so we need to add that. And the other thing that you need to do when you're adding this is you actually need to give the OpenAI key, otherwise it fails to like start at all. So we're going to give the API key. I do so many apps that I have it in an environment variable, always accessible to me. And then we will give the model as well. We're going to use the GPT 4.0, which was released 2 weeks ago.
The latest and greatest. And everyone tells me that it's so fast and so precise and so amazing and recommendations.
So like how a Hill application looks like is that you have your source main Java folder. That's your plain normal Spring Boot application. Then you have this source main frontend folder. That's where your front end lives. So what we can do is we can add a file here into a views directory. So views, and then we give it a special name of index.tsx. And just by giving it this name, it's going to get picked up and routed as the index page for this. So we're going to export a default function here. So every React component is a function. We're going to call this our travel tips. And I'm going to use GitHub Copilot here for saving you from watching me type a lot of things. And we're going to run the application. So we're just running the Spring Boot application. And the first time we do this, it's going to take a little while. You can see it starts the browser and it tells the front end development bundle is building.
There's a lot of things that needs to happen to make this work, right?
So I mean, what's happening behind the scenes is it's fetching front end dependencies and Maven dependencies. It's building, and when you're working in development time, what it does is it actually has a Vite dev server So anytime you make a change, it automatically reloads the browser. So it's a very quick like turnaround.
Oh, you know what? I was in Thomas Vitale's session just like an hour ago, and he was showing a demo that he also has built with Vaadin, and he was like talking about all of this, how amazing the UI is,
yeah,
and how he likes this like library load and stuff.
nice.
So, yeah, you're
all right.
right.
So we have it here. I'm gonna make this a little bit nicer. I'm gonna give it a class name of padding medium, so it kind of pushes out. It's not stuck to there. So now that we have our like place where we can start building the UI, we first need to somehow call the call OpenAI. We need to do all this interaction.
Right.
So we're going to go into our Java application. I'm going to create a service package, and we're going to call our thing travel tip service, like that maybe. And what's special with Hill is that you can add a browser callable annotation on a class, and that's going to allow us to call that class from TypeScript with the same signature, same type information. So it's essentially more like an RPC. Instead of exposing a REST API that's more semantic, this is actually method calls from the client to the server. So what we need to do then is we need to get the Spring AI client, the chat client. They just changed the API like yesterday or something. So we'll see.
What happened?
So we'll have a private
chat client,
final. Right? It's still a chat client, but instead of just injecting it like this, they now want to use a builder.
All right.
So similar to what was the rest. Well, I'm tired, but anyway. So we just build it. We don't need to configure anything here because we're just going with defaults. I'm going to create a record for managing the trip details. So you said that for this application, you wanted to have the destination, where are we going, what are your interests, so we can give you very specific recommendations, and then your mood as well. That's of course very important.
We'll define the recommendation, right?
So then we will define an API for this. So we'll start with just the simplest way of just doing a blocking call. So we're just going to call the API, wait for a string to get returned to us, and see how that works. So that's just the basic way of doing it. But then we can look at how do we actually stream the response.
Modify it,
So we'll do a method that returns a string, and let's get travel tips. Okay, that's a good idea. Let's give a let's do a private static final string template. So we probably want to have some sort of template for this AI to kind of give it some context to what it is that we want to do. So I created this template saying like, hey, you're an expert traveler with near infinite knowledge of the world. You love to give travel tips to others, and you're always happy to help. And then it has a couple of these placeholders in the template. So I'm traveling to destination. I'm interested in interest, and so essentially we're mapping these things that we have here.
You know, it still blows my mind that you can just talk to the API in like human language. I mean, it's the whole essence of LLMs, but it's still so weird for me that you can just, speak in normal human language.
So what I'm doing here is, let's type this out and see what's happening. So we're using the Spring AI prompt template. We feed in this template here, and then we create an instance of that, a prompt, by calling create. Then we pass a map that contains as keys these placeholders, and then we use this record that we pass in to actually fetch those. Then the actual call to the API becomes quite easy. We just call prompt, pass in the prompt, we call, and then we say that we want the content out of there. So what I do now is I just kind of, by going to the browser, it actually rebuilt this project. Spring Boot DevTools captured that, so we can go into our UI here and start building out things. So there are a couple of things I want to do. First of all, we have in Hilla this idea of a form. So since we have this record of trip details, we can actually use the form to bind all those different parts of it. So we can bind the mood and the interests and the destination to input fields in the UI. So we don't have to like manually map back and forth between. So I'm going to do a const, and then this is weird kind of syntax if you're not used to TypeScript. So we're destruct.
I'm not used to TypeScript, no.
Okay, so I'll type it out and then I'll explain what's happening. Model submit, and let's import some things here. So we're going to import that, and we're going to import use form, and then let's give an empty object here for now. So calling use form returns an object with a bunch of different fields. But in this case, we're destructuring. So we're only pulling out three different properties from that object into named variables, so we don't have to. You can see that this trip details model that's coming from the generated folder. So this is essentially Hilla generates a descriptor of that Java object, so that we know what are the types, and if we had defined some like constraints with like bean validation annotations, we could say that, hey, this always needs to be between 3 and 5 characters, and this date needs to be in the past. Then the other thing that we need to do here is define what should happen when we submit the form. So we can say on submit, and
that's when we will send the request to the OpenAI API, right?
Yeah. So the onSubmit method here is going to be an async method. So when we're calling the server, it's going to be an asynchronous call, because it might take however long, and we don't want to be blocking the UI while we're doing that. So what we can do here then is we can call the server, and then we want to somehow get the answer. So the way React works is that you have a state, and then you have a template, and the template gets re-rendered anytime the state changes. So I want to have one piece of state that captures the markdown that we get back from OpenAI. It always likes to respond in markdown, so we're going to use that.
I had to manually modify it because it looks so horrible in my app.
Well, we're going to live with it. We're going to actually deal with it. So we're going to do some weird React syntax here again. So we're going to have two pieces of state. So one is like we want to know when it's actually doing this call, so we can prevent user from trying to submit multiple calls if it takes long.
So you're gonna show me like some kind of in progress state.
Yeah, and the other one will be a markdown. So what's the response? It's gonna start out as an empty string, and then as we get a answer from there, we can set it. So this is kind of weird and different in Hilla. So what we can do is we can call set markdown. So we're gonna set the state by awaiting our, travel tip service. So you can see that it's auto-generated a TypeScript service with the same name, and we can auto-complete. We can see what are the methods we have available, and it expects in a trip details. Now, this is something that you're going to run into quickly if you are using Hilla for the first time. It's complaining about things being undefined potentially. And this is where like Java and TypeScript don't really meet eye to eye on what's nullable and what's not. Java is like anything can be nullable, sure, why not? And TypeScript's like nothing can be nullable unless you explicitly say that it can be. So what I usually do is I tend to like never return null from anything, because I just don't feel like that's very good API design. So to kind of tell our compiler that I'm going to be a responsible API designer, I'm going to tell that I have a non-null API, and this is going to simplify the type details that we get back. So now instead of everything potentially being nullable, this travel tips is always going to return the object. Okay, so we have essentially, let's see, we need one more closing bracket there. Obviously now we need the actual UI for capturing all of this. So we're going to create a div here, and so we're creating a div, and then in here we need, so what do we have? The destination,
country, destination, yeah.
So text field for destination.
Then I think it's interest in your design.
Yeah, and the syntax here is essentially we're using this field method that we're getting from the Vaadin form, and we are passing it different parts of the model, saying that this input field should be bound to that specific. And then for the mood, let's do a combo box. And right now we're inlining just an array of different moods that we might have. Then finally, we need a button, and on click, we are going to call this submit method here, and that's going to trigger this. Okay. And good. Here we're setting it. The button will be disabled whenever the working state is true.
Yep.
So we actually forgot to do that. So we're going to say set working here to true, and then set working to false, like this. All right. So then, of course, we need to output the markdown here, like that, and maybe it works. I don't know. Let's see. Okay. So this doesn't look really great. I'm going to do a little bit of. So I'm going to use flex.
Maybe I get in there, but it could be a pretty area. Yes.
Is that better? And then items baseline. Yeah, button.
Okay, this is nice.
So you can see there's a pretty quick turnaround with the UI getting updated as we're doing.
It also looks prettier than anything you would sit down and just write in HTML, you know.
Yeah. I did Flex grow. So now our interest will grow and we'll have a nice looking.
Hey, if you don't mind, there is a question, I think, about the fields, right?
All right, let's see. Are the methods field model and submit provided by default when using form? Yeah. Yeah, so when we call use form, we get an object that has all these fields, and we can destructure them. So there are other things like there's a valid thing, or I think it's invalid. So if you want to bind, for instance, that you don't want to submit while the form is invalid, so if all the validations pass, you could do that. So yeah, they're all default features.
Cool.
All right, so we are in Barcelona.
Yeah, let's do it.
Interests?
Oh, let's do music.
What's your mood?
Let's excited, yeah.
Excited. Get tips.
Okay.
All right, so we see the button got disabled here.
Very cool. And the progress bar. That's
the progress bar that's built in, but now we're kind of running into one problem here, is that the call that we did is generating quite a lot of text here, and it took quite a while. So it kind of we had a progress bar, but it wasn't like ideal.
But you know, it's my observation that somehow my calls to GPT-4 all seem to be slower than to GPT-4. Like I don't know, but that's my observation so far.
And obviously, we got Markdown. It looks like not great. So
can we make it prettier?
Yes. So this is a React application. So what we can do is we can do npm ei React Markdown. So we're obviously not writing our own Markdown parser. We're gonna install somebody else's.
Very cool.
And so that will get installed. Then we're gonna wrap this Markdown in a Markdown component like this. Boop, like that. Bam. Well, now it's refreshed, but for a brief moment you were able to see that. So let's do use sick. So I only want to really do one more thing here, and it's going to turn this into a streaming response, so similar as you have in like your ChatGPT, where it's writing out each token at a time.
That would be cool, yeah.
But let's just make sure we got the Markdown working. So now it's rendering out as Markdown.
That's very pretty, yeah.
So it looks pretty decent for the amount of time we've spent on this. So then I want to go back to my service here, and instead of using call, we're going to call stream. It's going to get angry at us because the return type changed to flux. That's okay. So we're going to let this rebuild now, and that's going to regenerate the TypeScript service. And in just a moment, when that's rebuilt, it's going to get really angry at us here, saying that, hey, your backend API changed. You need to do something about it. This is not going to work. So now we can't call what we had here. Instead, we're going to call still the same service with the same method, but now we are going to say that, hey, on next, so on next, and we get one token or a few tokens at a time, and we're going to set the Markdown to whatever the previous Markdown was plus that new token, and React will take care of like efficiently re-rendering all of this. And then when the stream completes, we set the working back to false.
We're finished working, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go here. We're going to go to Barcelona. Music, food, mood is happy. And we want to get some tips.
Oh, this looks super cool.
So there's clearly something going on a little bit with the Markdown parser not really understanding something.
Nobody can play with the template, but overall,
I don't think we're going to spend too much time on that particular thing.
Let's make it native, maybe.
Yeah, let's go native. So I think we're happy with what it does right now. We don't need to do anything more. So I'm going to close the development server. And we are going to do a build. So with Maven, we ship with this production profile, and that essentially turns off some of these development time niceties that we have. We don't want to have those in the actual like native image. It doesn't make any sense.
And this is very important if you want to build a Vaadin app to native, right?
Yeah. So. And the other profile we have is native. So this is coming from the parent Spring boot. And then we call native compile. And then we wait for a little bit. And
as we wait, maybe I can talk about some new exciting stuff that is coming in GraalVM. How about that?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So there are two cool things that we are working on. One is, for example, like a build for a larger application can take a while, right? And we understand it. And that's for good reasons, because we are doing so much work at build time, the work you would normally do at runtime. But we understand that, and we have a very cool idea how we can account for that. And that is that we want to introduce layered native images, where let's say you have your Spring Boot application and you will be able to say, hey, I want to compile my JDK base, my Spring base, my Spring Web as those, not exactly, but kind of shared libraries. So I have them compiled. And then every time I'm introducing changes, I'm only recompiling my user code, and those stay compiled. So every time I'm only recompiling this thin layer, and we think we can take compilation time
sort of
down
like
to
a
seconds.
Docker image.
Exactly. So we were kind of inspired by that. So we think this will give us faster build times, but also when you're deploying your application, let's say you want to have 5 instances of the app, and they can, if they are the same applications, they can reshare those base layers, and you can have resources sharing, let's say, in the cloud, right? So like the same Spring Web, Spring Base, etc., can be reused between the instances. So this is a very big project. We need to change a lot of things for this, but this is one of the big things we are working on.
Do you want to explain what's happening here?
Oh,
like
absolutely.
If somebody doesn't know,
Like, so like right now
it says it's building a universe. Like, it doesn't actually spin up a
there is
alternate
actually,
reality.
there is an entire universe of your application that we need to build and explore. So what is happening now, we are analyzing your application ahead of time to compile only the necessary parts ahead of time, so that you can just start that with the compiled, optimized machine code very fast. But for that, we need to explore your whole application, pull the config from all the classes. And even here, if you pay attention to the output, it says that they have found like about 53K reachable fields. So even for our app, that is fairly minimal, but it has some dependencies. It has a lot of stuff going on. So, it's not trivial to explore something as big as your entire Java project and compile it ahead of time, right? That's why this build sometimes can take, like a few minutes for a larger project. But this is something that needs to happen. And also, it's not exactly introducing any overhead comparing to the JVM. It's just shifting the work that the JVM is doing at runtime to build time, right? So maybe you can do it once, and then you can deploy your app, and you can start it as many times as you need.
There was one thing I realized as I was building apps where it was failing, and I realized that adding like an annotation with register build time hint for some stuff that where you're going to need reflection for something. So I noticed that adding that for some fields or some classes, I should say, was helpful. But in this case, we didn't need to do that because we're not doing anything too crazy.
Oh, look at that. Our build is finished, and it's in 2.5 minutes.
I realized our faces were on top of the Maven command, so I'm gonna show it here.
Okay, cool.
So that was Maven p production p native compile, and then when we have built it, we are gonna go into the target folder, and we want to get the travel
app, I think it's
travel tips, like that, and then we just launch it, and it started up in too quick for me to actually even see. There we go. So
134 milliseconds.
And if we didn't mess up anything, and
it should work
everything
the
should
exact same way. Let's give it a try.
And we are going to be excited. So let's see if that works. There we go.
Yay. That's the exact same thing, but how much faster was it, right? It's just like a fraction of a second.
Yeah, and I mean, like I told you before the stream started, I've been running a native compiled app on a Fly.io server, consuming like 105 megs of RAM. Like, it's been up and running for
almost nothing for the web application that is ready to accept requests or serve them, produce some logic, right? It's
exactly. Cool. So it's quite remarkable, and also like Fly is super aggressive at spinning down stuff, so it doesn't matter because like it spins up in the well within what like a normal response would be. So like you can't really even tell that it's spinning up a Java application.
But this is pretty cool. Look at that. Running as a native app, has a beautiful UI, and we did it in what, like a matter of 20 minutes maybe with all the talking.
Well,
so
29 minutes.
No, but we've been talking for a while, right?
Exactly. So I think I think it's pretty good. We managed to build a pretty decent app, and it does things. It's more than just like a hello world app.
And I want to point out that we didn't need to do any configuration, right? So sometimes for more dynamic Java features, reflection, serialization properties, it might be the case that if you're using a library that is not friendly towards native image yet, it needs a bit of help from your end. And there are multiple ways to do it. But in this case, it didn't have to do anything. Everything just worked out of the box, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool, I think.
That's very cool. So,
and I think people share our excitement, right?
Yeah, Daniel is
I can
excited.
See
Yeah. Let's put that up here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. That's super cool. But yeah, I think we're gonna keep this one short. So unless anyone has questions within the next,
I have not a question, but maybe a comment. So I think you also have a repo on GitHub where people, if they want to try it out or if they want to look closer at the code, they can go and explore the same app, right?
Yeah, so I can share that on my Twitter. Maybe you can
retweet
that, and then people can try this out on their own computer and point out all the things we did wrong.
Or maybe they want to extend the application and make it even more cool, right? Maybe they have some ideas. So
yeah, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Alina. I'm so happy we were able to do this, and it was fun to do it in person.
Absolutely.
It's great to be here in Barcelona, and let's go and explore some of that food
and get some lunch. Yeah. Thank you, guys. And if you have any questions, just follow up. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.